Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Crap. Can you hear me now? How about now? Anyone? Hear me, hear me, hear me. Sorry guys, technical difficulties. Crap. Can you hear me now? We're good? How about now? Anyone? Sounds like we're good. Once again, I'm sorry about the technical difficulties. I switched to a new computer. I don't know if you heard that part. And I'm just kind of all in on this live stuff right now. So that's part of the reason why we've got some little issues going forward. Hopefully these things won't happen ever again. And it's also part of the reason I started a little early. Okay, good. I'm glad you guys can all hear me now. So feel free to start asking your questions in the live chat. I'm probably going to look at yesterday's video or yesterday's stream to see, what questions we have there. I'm really interested in this live Q&A sort of stuff because it allows me to really connect with you guys one-on-one. So if you want to be a part of these live streams or know about them, make sure you subscribe on joincfe.com/YouTube or obviously the YouTube channel you're watching this on maybe. And then click the little bell to get notifications because I usually announce the event at least half an hour before I actually go live, and YouTube has a nice little feature of letting you know that the event is coming. So feel free to ask your questions below. I think you guys can hear me fine now. I'm checking on another feed just to double check. Yeah, it's good. Okay, and then I'm going to just jump into yesterday's video to address any questions I may have missed. There might be some. Let's see. I got a question about an older course not being up to date. Yeah, so some of the older courses that I released, they still have a ton, or that I have released and they're years old, they still have a ton of valuable information in them, I promise you, because Django hasn't really changed that much year to year. But what is true about Django is the things that do change, I typically cover in my Try Django series. And that usually doesn't come out right when the new version comes out because they usually have new patches come out shortly after that. So that's one of the reasons why you'll look on some of these older courses and see that some things might be broken. They're just not maintained. Instead, what I usually do is release a new version of that course in some form, and that code is usually on joincfe.com/GitHub. So let me know in the comments if you can't find it. And that question was from, let's see, that was Zumo TV. Zumo TV, thanks for the question. I appreciate it. I did try to respond to you in there. And then I've got Jamaldin Pro. Jamaldin Pro asked, how can I sell my websites? Are you talking about selling the business, or are you talking about selling like some templates? I'm guessing that you're talking about selling your actual business that runs the website. You can look up a business broker. Business brokers probably deal with selling websites fairly often. I don't actually know. I don't have a solid answer for you there. I would imagine if you are trying to sell it, there are a lot of different places that you can go about doing that. Okay, I'll just answer one more question. As far as writing or asking questions after the stream is done, just ask them in the comments of the video below, right? So like right now you're in this live chat, that doesn't get transferred over to the final video. Just keep that in mind when you do ask questions after this is done. And I do try to do what I just did, is go to the next stream. I'll look back at the previous one and look at some of those questions and try and answer those as best I can. Okay, so cool. Now I'll go ahead and jump into the questions you guys have. And Dari971, do you have a video, or are you planning on doing a video deploying to Heroku, setting up Celery, Postgres, etc.? Yeah, we actually cover launching to Heroku in a lot of different videos. I think Try Django 1.11 has it. One of the Try Djangos definitely does. I think multiple do. It's actually really pretty straightforward to set up and deploy to Heroku. And then on our blog, joincfe.com/blog, I talk about how to implement Celery on a Django project. And then I'm pretty sure Heroku's blog itself has some step-by-step guide on deploying Celery on their system. And all of that will use Redis as well as Postgres SQL. Thanks for the question, Dari971. Really appreciate it. And thank you guys for being here. I'm really liking doing this a lot. And it helps that you guys are here, because that makes a big difference. Ravi asks, chat system in Django. Like, is it possible? Yes. Take a look at Django Channels. Django Channels is asynchronous Django, and it allows for WebSockets, so you can build a chat engine through Django Channels. It's a really interesting technology. Charles, we've got, which has more job requirements, PHP or Node.js? When you're saying job requirements, do you mean project requirements, or are you referring to like what skills you need to know for those different technologies? Node.js, I would imagine you probably have to know JavaScript really well to do well in Node.js. PHP, I think, is kind of on its way out. So if you were going to pick between PHP and Node.js, I would go the Node.js route, because JavaScript is probably not going anywhere anytime soon. The reason I think PHP is still around is because big businesses, including Facebook, still use PHP a lot. So there is still demand for it, but I don't think it's that clean of a language. I would rather use JavaScript or Python myself. Hopefully that answers your question. If it doesn't, please let me know in the comments. Thank you for the question, Charles. I do appreciate it. Akeem, thanks so much for the question. Django, do you use it personally or for blogging only? What is the usefulness with the Django MVC framework? So do I use Django beyond blogging? Absolutely. I use it for every web development project I have. And also, I can use Django with my IoT devices. So I have a Raspberry Pi somewhere around here. I had to move my office around. But I have a Raspberry Pi, and I actually use Django on that too to control different things. Like, you can use Django to control devices as well while having a local area network Django version showing up, so you can actually use it on your local area network computers. You can go to that Raspberry Pi's IP address and actually run some stuff from it, and all of that is controlled through Django and Python. But Django and Apache or Nginx are the ones that do the web portion of that. It's really cool. So yeah, I use Django a lot. If you're interested in something like that, I definitely have a tutorial on it called Home Baked. So let's see, Simon Wibberly, thanks for the question. Guys, I really appreciate it. Please keep them coming. This helps us all get better. I honestly think that. I mean, you guys ask a lot of really good questions, and you have for the past 5 years, and it's just made me a much better developer all around. So I appreciate it. Simon, I've come across a tut that showcases a custom admin, i.e. not using Django admin at all. It'd be great if I could do that. Cheers. So, like, my big question about, I hear this a lot about customizing the Django admin. Now, if you're spending a ton of time customizing the Django admin, like, what is it for exactly? Right? So a lot of people that I've heard do this are doing it in lieu of building their own views and their own like CRUD related stuff, and trying to opt for using the Django admin itself. Personally, I think the Django admin's there for just a unique, uniform way to control the data in the database. But if you were starting to want to customize it so much that it doesn't even look like the Django admin anymore, and I'm not talking about the design of it, I'm talking, or like the CSS design of it or the user interface design of it, I'm talking more about like the actual usage of it, then I would suggest just making your own views and doing it that way. That way you still have the Django admin as a backup. Yes, there's things that you can customize in the admin to help your workflow back there when you need to work in it, because sometimes you do. But going over and above, I wouldn't recommend doing it. I'm happy to hear other reasons for why you might need to, so let me know about those. But customizing the Django admin in general, I think there's like if you're doing too much of it, then if you're doing a lot of it, then you're doing too much of it, right? You shouldn't have to be doing a lot of it or anything beyond the scope of what is actually on the documentation for customizing the Django admin. That's my own opinion. Again, I'm happy to hear others and maybe counter that as to why you may absolutely need to really, really customize the admin. That might not be the answer you want to hear. You probably want to hear me showing you an even more custom admin. And if it's more related to what's on the documentation and that's what you're looking for, let me know. That might be an interesting thing if you guys want to see that. Now, let's see. I got Human Kabir. Thanks for the question, both of you, Simon and Huayan. Sorry if I'm pronouncing that incorrectly. Can you please tell me about the roadmap of web development with Python and Django? So, like, what do you mean by this? Do you mean the roadmap of what those, like, third-party, like, what Python and the core development team is doing and Django, the core development team, is doing? Or do you mean, like, what I think you should be doing with it and how you build things for it? I really need that clarified. Otherwise, I'm going to go on a super long tangent, and I'm not ready to do that right now. Thanks for the question, though, and much love from Newport. You're from Bangladesh. I'm from Newport Beach in California in the United States. Yeah. So, Kartik asks, what to learn after watching your 1.9 Django videos? Also, does competitive programming ever help me in my career? Competitive programming referring to what exactly? I must be out of the loop on competitive programming. I'm assuming it means like you compete against people, like you code something and somebody else codes something and you're like trying to get the best result. If that's what competitive programming is, I would say that would probably help you. I mean, especially if you're a beginner, or maybe if you're not, because it's a challenge, and a lot of times when you have to do these sort of challenges, you have to think of things differently and you have to do it in a fast manner. That would probably be a really good thing. Now, what to learn after watching the Django, the Try Django 1.9? Well, we have Try Django 1.10, 1.11. You can absolutely do one of those, or you could check out our e-commerce course and go through this whole thing, because that is the most comprehensive thing that we have. It's available on joincfe.com/courses. It's not a free thing on YouTube, so there's definitely a lot more things on YouTube that you can watch to get better at building whatever it is that you're building. So I would say if you finished Try Django 1.9 and you did all of the other things that are related to it, like advancing the blog and the blog API, if you do all of those, then check out Try Django 1.11. I actually like that one a lot more than 1.10, and it's comprehensive. It's very, very comprehensive. So I would jump there. Let's see, what's next? Charles, it looks like maybe I got the same question from you twice. Hopefully I answered it enough for you about the job requirements with PHP and Node.js. Next one, Evans asks, you're new to Django. Can you explain the importance of a REST API. Yeah, so if you take the blog API project or the build a REST API project that was more recent, any API is essentially so Django can communicate with something else. And that something else can be a front-end framework such as like Angular or React. You can integrate then using Django with Angular or React. You have to integrate those things some way if you want Django's data, like if you want the database from Django. So Angular or React uses a REST API to work with Django. But this is not just exclusive to Django. So REST APIs are all over the place. So if you want your Django project to work with a payment processor, such as Stripe or Braintree, you use Stripe or Braintree's REST API to actually interact with your service. So what REST APIs do is they allow services to communicate with each other in a uniform way, and they also allow your service to communicate with like front-end frameworks or even other Django projects or other projects you may have. So REST APIs are just a really simple way of, simple and can be complex, but it's kind of like this methodology of connecting software together that don't necessarily speak the same language. So when I said you can connect your Django project to your Angular project, well, Angular's in TypeScript, which compiles into JavaScript, and to have JavaScript talk to Python, you need some uniform way to have them communicate, and a REST API allows that to happen, typically allows that to happen through sort of a uniform standard that you'll see on a lot of REST APIs, which typically use the data type JSON or XML. So you'll probably see more often than not, you'll see something like JSON, that's JSON, which stands for JavaScript Object Notation. You'll probably see that a lot. So building a REST API allows your system or any system to communicate with one another, and it's a really powerful way to do so, and it's common practice of doing that. I like that question. Thank you so much. I mean, I do talk about it a lot in other things, but yeah. So next question, Charles asks, is C in 2018 relevant? So the language C, is that relevant? Absolutely, 100% relevant. It's just a very low-level language, so it's a lot more nitty-gritty. It's harder to actually learn and build stuff with, in my opinion. I think Python's a lot easier, but a lot of programming languages, and I believe even Python, get compiled down to C, and then C gets compiled down to the actual computer language code that runs. So C is definitely still relevant, but it's for you, those of you who really want to be on like the nerdiest of nerd side of building software. That's what I think. I mean, Python's up there too as far as nerdy because of what it can do, but C, if you're wanting the fastest, most robust things, you'll probably be building it in some level of C. Python can do a lot of those things, but at the end of the day, Python's an abstraction of what would come down to C or machine code. Okay, hopefully that answers your question. I do like that one. And I would imagine that C developers would feel the same way. Chris Woodrum, Django, how to make it where each others can have their own channel. So are you referring to a channel like on YouTube, or are you referring to something else? So like if you were to say it was like YouTube, well, basically you'd have to build an app that's related to channels and then do a one-to-one relationship with a user and a channel if you want it to be in one-to-one, or you do a foreign key if you want it to be more than that. And then you just have that user being able to upload stuff like a video or a live stream like we have here. It's actually fairly straightforward. So it's not actually a whole lot different than building a blog. It's just the requirements of it are just slightly different. So it makes it maybe a little bit more complicated. I do have a Twitter-like project called Tweet Me that does something similar where you can follow things and post stuff. Granted, it's posting text, and I'm not sure if we implemented images or not, but it's posting text, and you can follow and retweet and do all these things. But it shows you how to do that in more detail than what I just mentioned. But I think if you did try Django 1.9, which is the blog project, if you did that all the way through, you should have a fairly good idea of how to adapt that, or you should at least challenge yourself to adapt that to having multiple users have their own blogs, which is essentially what Twitter is anyway. They're like little micro blogs, right? That's what it was called a long time ago, micro blogging. So you could take that and run with it that way. Hopefully that answers your question. If it doesn't, please let me know. Armstrong asks, "Hey Justin, when are you doing Django with React.js project? Or better yet, are you considering doing anything with React and Django?" You know, I get this question a lot, so I probably need to address it officially as a tutorial. So let's not get confused of what Django does and what React does. So React is a front-end framework. It relies, or can rely, on a back-end API that will allow it to work with data. Django can be only a back-end API. If you use the Django REST framework, you can actually build a back-end API service with Django, like we do in the blog API project on YouTube. You can build that back-end API, and then you just need to have Django serve a React JavaScript file to run React. Django can serve it in lieu of like Node.js. Now you don't have to do it that way. You can use Node.js and then have them interact with each other using that REST API that you built in Django, but they actually don't rely on each other and you don't need them for each other to work. So if you want a React front end, all you really need is one URL on Django that serves your React file, and it captures or collects all of the things from React, and then boom, you have the ability to have your React project running. The same is true for Angular. And we actually cover that in our Angular plus Django project, and also the Django plus Angular plus Ionic course. We cover those things there on how to do it, but it's really simple. The actual integration between Django and some front-end framework it can be very, very simple. The things that you need to think about are how to design your API in a way that makes it easy to design your React or Angular project, so then you don't have to switch back and forth too often between the front end and the back end in your development process. Yeah, I'll probably have to address this soon-ish to show you guys exactly what I mean, but hopefully that at least clarifies some things about it. So the goal is, if you're going to integrate any front-end framework like React, like Angular, or even like Java or Swift, what you need is a REST API using Django. You can use Django to build that REST API to interact with those services, and that's it. Okay. Any tutorial plan about blockchain with Python? So building a blockchain using Python. I'm really interested in this. I have a lot of things in my pipeline right now, but yes, I do eventually want to get to building some sort of blockchain project with Python, because it's really fascinating, and a lot of things are coming out because of it. I'm pretty sure there's probably already tutorials out there on YouTube on doing that exact thing, so maybe check those things out. And if you find a really good one that you want me to take a look at, please let me know, and I can potentially help address some questions that may come up in that as well, because I'm really interested in it too. And actually, that's true for anything. I mean, if you want me to watch a YouTube video, assuming it's not too long, that's related to some sort of tutorial, or you're not clear about something, just tag a time in that video and send it to me, and I'll try and have a look at it if I can. I mean, I'm kind of busy, but I'll try and help you guys out with those things, because I think a lot of you might benefit from it. So how do you make a real-time chat system in Django? This is from Ravi. Oh, and the last one, Deepayan. Thank you for that question. I do really appreciate it, and I like it. I like all these questions. It's just a lot of fun. It's cool to see how interested everyone is in all this stuff, because I am as well, obviously. Maybe not obviously, but I definitely am. Okay, so Ravi asks how to make a real-time chat system in Django. Ravi, I kind of covered this a few minutes ago, so if you rewind it, but you use something like Django Channels. Django Channels is asynchronous Django, but it also allows for WebSockets, and that is what you need. You need to build something using WebSockets to have chat. That's not the only way, but that's definitely a really good way, and probably the modern way to do it is using WebSockets, using something like Django Channels to make it happen. So Django Channels is an official Django project as well. So it's not some third-party project that may or may not be supported in the future. Django Channels has been, and they just recently released Django Channels version 2 that had some huge changes done to it. Cool. So can I tell you some good GitHub repo for a REST API? Natish, so like when you say for a REST API, do you mean somebody that's finished one, or do you mean that you want to use a third-party package? So if you're looking for somebody that's finished one, you can look at ours. joincfe.com/GitHub will take you to our GitHub repo, or it's the Coding for Entrepreneurs GitHub repo, and you would be able to see some of the REST API projects we have. I'm positive that the Django plus Angular plus Ionic one has a finished REST API in there, in Django, in the SRC folder. So just take a look at that, and you probably could get a really good idea of how to build one. And now as far as a third-party package that builds REST APIs, the Django REST framework is really, really awesome for that. And that's something that I cover in a few of the different API ones on my YouTube channel. So joincfe.com/YouTube will take you to the YouTube channel that I'm referring to, and it's probably where you're watching this video, because let's be honest, who's grabbing this video and putting it on their channel? I don't know. So consider doing that. All right, cool. Next one, Super Substitute. Thank you for your Q&A videos. You're welcome. Thank you for watching. I really appreciate it. Super Substitute, I've seen you. I feel like I've seen you every day since I've done it. Is that right? Please let me know. How can I use Django with Pug? Sorry, I don't know about some of the Django template engine. Sorry for my bad English. So Pug is Pug a template engine? You know what I'm gonna do? I'm actually gonna start Googling these things while I'm talking to you guys, because you ask some good questions and I want to just review things while we do it. How do we feel about that? I mean, it might take the questions a little bit longer. Oh, yes, I have seen Pug before. So it's a template engine for Node.js. So I haven't used Pug myself, but I would imagine you have to use the verbatim block in Django to render any sort of other handlebars. So those curly brackets that you see in Django, in the Django templating engine, you have to use block verbatim. So just Google verbatim or block verbatim in Django, and when you render anything else in the Django templating engine, you would just use that. Now, it looks like that this actually might render prior to being on a page. Like, it looks like you render this prior to actually putting it on something like Django, but it looks like there's also some things for Python in Pug as well. Python adapter. There's definitely a Python adapter. Oh, wait. I know what I can do. I should show you guys what I'm looking at. There we go. Okay, so this is Pug, right? It looks like to me that you use this and it then compiles into the actual HTML. So that's what Pug seems to do. I don't actually use Pug, so I don't have a whole lot to say there. But it does seem like it's a very popular thing. If you're considering jumping into Django, I would take the time to actually learn the Django templating engine. Cool. So if you guys want me to check out something that you're not sure I know, which it's impossible to know everything, so put a link. Like if you're referencing a third party, just say, oh, I want to know more about Pug, you know, using parentheses, put the link. That will help a lot, so I can just jump in and look at it while we're here. Cool. Or if I know about it, then I'll just jump into it, you know, that stuff. Okay, so can I create a tutorial for putting Django into production in a Linux environment? Yeah, I actually do this for DigitalOcean on joincfe.com/projects, where we set up a Linux computer on DigitalOcean and release it there. We also do it for AWS, I believe. We have one for Elastic Beanstalk, which is a Linux computer. And honestly, DigitalOcean's, if you search on DigitalOcean, Ubuntu, Django, production, something like that, DigitalOcean has a great guide on making that happen, honestly. I mean, if you want to see us walk through that guide, it's on my website, but they have a guide that's really good for it, and building Nginx and all those things that you need to do. And if you watch like my Try Django 1.11 project where we launch on Heroku, all of the getting ready for production portion would be relevant to DigitalOcean as well, or any other Linux production service. So having like a local file, a base file, and a production file for your settings module, I think those things are really good practices to get used to. Cool. Thanks for the question, Nitish. I appreciate it. Sunil, you ask any tutorial plan about Flask projects. Flask is a similar technology as Django, right? So it builds it's a web framework, so you can build backends using Flask. Excuse me, let me grab some water here real quick. So do I have any plans on doing Flask? Not at this time. I just think there's so much stuff that I can do with Django. Flask is just a lightweight version of Django, in my opinion. Like, I haven't used it enough to really give a solid recommendation on whether or not you should use it. But I do know that a lot of people use it for microservices. Like, you build a main Django project, and then you might have 5 Flask projects that are microservices. You might consider doing something like that, but I don't actually have a plan to do a tutorial on it at this time. Yogurt, I like the username. Yogurt asks, what's going on with your second channel? Which channel are you referring to? Because I have a few different ones. If you're referring to the one in Hit Startup, which I think is the one that you're talking about, it was a test. It was something I was testing out and just wasn't getting the sort of traction that I liked. So my energy dwindled on it a lot. Doesn't mean that it's done. It just means that I've been putting my efforts elsewhere for now. I think it's really important to test things out with people all the time, and that's what I did. I was just running an experiment, and it didn't go the way I wanted. So project put to the side at this time, at least. I mean, building something that so building something in general takes a lot of time, right? So if you want to build something successful, it will take a lot of time. So I think it's really important for you to try out that momentum. So you get this really good idea and you're like, I want to make this thing happen. I think it's really important to push that momentum until it gets hard. So once it gets hard, you might be like, oh, yes, I still want to make this happen. I still think about it all day, every day, but it's really hard right now. When that happens, then you need to push through the hard. But when it gets hard and you're like, you know what? I really want to make something different. Go make something different. It's just about doing things and then pushing forward. And then there's nothing wrong with putting something on the shelf and maybe revisiting it later. Nothing at all. But I'd say that if you're not going through the hard because it's hard, and that's the only reason, but you're dwelling on it, your effort is there, your attention is there, and you stop because it gets hard, that means that you kind of gave up. Whereas the other one, or not kind of, you did give up. That is giving up. That's what I think is giving up. Whereas the other one is quitting something that's just not working because you have something else that's pulling your attention in a different direction, right? I think this is true for school as well, right? So if you're in college, if you're at a university, or I mean, if you're in any level of education and you feel like you're wasting your time, but you don't have anything that's pulling you elsewhere, well, then just maximize school, because you can still learn a ton in school, right? So yeah, you might feel a little bit like you're wasting your time because maybe it's not relevant in the future, maybe it is, but you can still learn a lot. So you can pick the brains of the professors and your fellow classmates and all that. And then once you land on something that's pulling you, and you will know what pulling feels like, something that's pulling you in a different direction, then you put all your effort, energy, and attention on that thing versus when you're pushing for it, right? So when you're pushing, it's an uphill battle, and it's a lot more difficult to even just get started. But when you're being pulled towards something, it's like magical. I'll give you an example of what I mean by that. So, a more personal example. So when you're dating, so like you're looking for a mate, a partner, right? What is it that you do? Like you might talk to a bunch of different people, and some people, so in my case, it'd be talking to a woman, they will either show you that they're interested and it feels like you're being pulled that direction, or they'll show you that they're not interested and you feel like you're kind of being pushy about it. So you want to look for those things that pull you. That's what I think. And yeah, you'll still get hard times when things are being pulled towards you, but you just work through it and then you adapt. That's what I do with projects. I do it all the time. It's just sometimes you guys hear about it, sometimes you don't. Thanks for the question. I really like it. Wow, I'm really far behind. Sorry, guys. You're asking a lot of great questions. And also, I go on tangents. Have you noticed? Maddie asks, will you make some tutorial about how to put Django on Amazon or other Linux-based servers? I just touched on this a little bit. I do have some on joincfe.com/projects that are related to that exactly. Gerson asks, what about something about downloading and recovering database data? Also move hosting service. So how do you download and recover database data? Look into something called fixtures. This is a good way to pull your data from Django and whatever database you're using in JSON. So you can actually pull the data as fixtures into JSON so you can have some backups that way. So you can even run a job that does that regularly. Now that's just so you can reload it right back into Django and things work fairly smoothly. Otherwise, you can run a job that actually downloads and gets a backup of your database. And a lot of services or hosts do that. But if you're wanting to move to a different host and maybe even a different backend or a different database technology, I think fixtures is a good way to do that, with the exception of live data. Sometimes it gets a little convoluted. So doing it through Django is rather challenging. So this is where picking your host from the get-go is fairly important, or realize that you will have some downtime. So if you end up doing it the fixtures route, you'll definitely have some downtime. If you're moving one database to another, like a MySQL database to another MySQL database, there is a way to copy those databases over. And you might still have to put in some downtime for the web service, but it also depends on how much data you actually have and how much you're moving. Once it gets really, really big, it gets a lot more difficult and outside the scope of my skill set, to be honest with you. If it's big enough, you'll probably want somebody who's really well versed in transitioning a MySQL or PostgreSQL database to a new service. Another idea would be to implement a new server into your system and use two different servers for a while, and then eventually transition everything over into that new server. And then that's that. That's also a little bit complicated. Hopefully that answers your question. Thanks for the question, Gerson. I appreciate it. JM, if those are your initials, I like them. Those are my initials too. What is faster to build a website with, Django or AWS API Gateway and Lambda with DynamoDB? What's faster for me to build something with? Django. I can build a Django project in no time. I don't actually know Amazon's API Gateway and Lambda that well, but I've heard really, really good things that you can build all sorts of microservices using AWS Lambda quickly. If you're not familiar with AWS Lambda, basically it just runs functions based off of some preset criteria that you might have. For example, if you upload an image into S3, which is on AWS, if you upload an image there, you can have something for Lambda to actually process that image for you, and then it's done. And it works on demand when things happen. It's something really cool about Lambda. But me personally, I can build something in Django in a lot less time than it would take for me to implement something in Lambda at this point. At some point that might change because Lambda has a lot of really cool features like the one I just mentioned. And you can do that with video too. It doesn't have to just be like images. You can do it with all sorts of things. Cool. Charles, glad I answered your question. Awesome. Happy to give advice when I can. Definitely check out these live events if you want more of them. Subscribe, hit that bell to get the notifications about when I release them. Amani, big thanks for your great content, helping a lot with your final project. Happy to help, Amani. I'm glad, or is it Amani? Sorry if I don't pronounce your names right. I try really hard to guess them, but I'm still learning a lot of different names. So as you can, also can you do a video challenge on how to implement Django with Angular? It's challenging. I just went over this, so probably around the time you asked this question. So rewind it a little bit if you want to see that. Harvad, Mr. Singh, can I call you that? Do you know JQ widgets? I do not. Shoot me a link and we'll take a look at it in just a moment. I don't know what that is. after learning the basics of Python, what should I do after that? Charles asks that. So when you say the basics of Python, what do you mean by that exactly? I think that's general. Like, did you just learn how to do variables and functions? That is super basic, but one that doesn't know that much about it might not know that's the basics. So I would say try to build something. Try to build something real in Python. So I mentioned Lambda being able to process images. Make something that processes images, or make something that sends a text message to your friend. Both of those things can be done just in Python using API services, but I'm leaving you with how to do that. Like, answer the how. I could answer it for you, but that's what you will do as a beginner once you learn some of the basics. Is like, now I need to build something real, or you can jump into something like Django to build a web project if you're interested in that. So our Try Django series, we have a lot of those things that actually show you step by step on how to do it. But I would just challenge yourself to build a project. Once you learn anything new, just build a project with it, whatever it is, right? Even if it's learn how to sew, like, go build a project. That will help you get better at it, I promise. Cool. Thanks for the questions, Charles. Appreciate it. JM, learning the intermediates. Not sure what you mean by that. Please rephrase the question. Gab, can you do biometrics attendance using JavaScript only? Probably, but I'm not sure. What are you trying to do exactly? I would imagine there's something for JavaScript that allows you to have some sort of biometric scanner for monitoring attendance of something. I would imagine that exists somewhere. Maybe, maybe not. More research, maybe. I don't work in that stuff, so I don't have a really great answer for you, as you can tell. Can you make a tutorial for API integration in Django? Well, actually, a lot of our tutorials use APIs and they integrate them in Django. So you're gonna have to be way more specific about what API integration you're looking for. Easy Gupta asked, you didn't answer my question. Your best project that you've developed and running live that we can take some lesson from. Oh, so the best project I've done so far, and that is live and that you can learn from. So the best project that I have that's live, in my opinion, is codingforentrepreneurs.com. So my main website for my business, that is the best website that I had. A couple things. Number one, when you implement new features for anything, well, hold off on them. Right, so I spent a bunch of time building this voting up, voting down thing for comments, much like YouTube has, on my site, and nobody used it. I spent, like, I want to say a few weeks on making it work perfectly. Nobody used it ever. It was really, really, it was kind of frustrating. So what I would say is, what I learned from building that project is make things as simple as possible, and then add when you see demand for it. So if you have, like, a good example for that, like on Coding for Entrepreneurs, if I was having on any given video as many questions as I have in this live stream, it would probably make sense to then start to implement the vote, upvote or downvote sort of thing, and also multi-threading. So, you know, like if you are on Reddit, YouTube does it a little bit too, but Reddit has these multi-threading things where it's like one thread and then a subthread and then a subthread of the subthread and then a subthread of the subthread of the subthread. Like, those are features that are really nice to have, but you shouldn't implement them until you start seeing a real solid demand for it. And that's one of my biggest takeaways with Coding for Entrepreneurs is I should have went with the absolute basics of things. Not even having a search function, not even having multi-threaded comments and stuff like that. Just get the absolute core of it out there so you can get feedback from real users and not spend too much time in development. Because once you get feedback, you'll know where you should go. For example, if you didn't put a search engine on your site, then you can actually get questions, or you have your email address so people can email you and say, hey, I couldn't find X. It was really hard for me to find Y. Like, where is this? Where is that? That's when you start building a search engine, when people ask you for the results of what a search engine can do. And you still will get those questions. So maybe you don't build a search engine yet. Maybe instead you build a frequently asked questions page, one long page with the question in bold and then the answer below it, and then below, and then keep going, because every web browser has a way to search the page itself. So, you know, Control F or Command F, you type in the question. Like, so basically you want to go as simple as possible when you build any project, and strip away things as much as possible too, right? So I look at Coding for Entrepreneurs right now. If I was looking at it from a entrepreneur or a marketer's perspective, there is so much stuff that I could just remove and be like, nope, nope, nope. We don't need that. We don't need that. We can use this third-party package. We can use this third-party service for all of those things, and just really just nail down the core of what it is, which I believe is the content, right? You go to codingforentrepreneurs.com for the content. That's why you're there. It's not for the comments. It's not for the questions. It's not for the search engine. It's for the comments, or it's the content. So to strip away as much as you possibly can is absolutely critical in building your project. Now, the reason I have all those other things is because I am technical. I'm super interested in building those things out because it helps me build better content, for one. For two, I'm just super interested in it. So that might be the other aspect as to why you might build these other features if you have interest. Now, the thing that I started with, that upvote and downvote thing, I had somewhat interest, but I was convinced that it was a feature that needed to happen, and I was wrong. I was just simply wrong. So sometimes you do need to test things and see how they work as well. But whenever you're building a project, go as simple as possible, get it in the hands of real users, because as soon as real users start using it, your expectations should break. Like, what you want them to do will not always be what they do. It's just plain and simple. It's the way of the world. And it's not any different from building a physical business as well, right? So like if you were building a restaurant, for example, and you're like, oh, I'm going to put the sign right here. And then you notice that the first 10 people that walk in there, 8 of them run into that sign. It's like, oh, maybe I should move that sign somewhere else. That's kind of what I'm saying. It's like you got to see the behavior of what your users do online and the questions they ask. And that's why I think it's also important that the developers see the questions that are being asked about the site so you can make changes. It's not just your customer support that's doing that. Thanks for the question. I really like that one, obviously. Okay. So, Akeem, how about C? I just mentioned C. C has a lot of really, really good things. C and C++, they're lower level languages. They take a different type of person that's trying to make things happen to learn C. So if you really want to advance on another level, then yeah. But if you don't know, if you haven't mastered one yet, Python is a really good one to start with. So once you master Python, you'll probably have a better idea of whether or not you want to go for C or C++, or Java or JavaScript. So stick with one until you master it, and then those sorts of questions start to become a little bit more clear, right? Like, it's just plain and simple. So you asked me if the home-baked repo utilizes C skills and if you should brush up on them. Home-baked uses Python pretty much exclusively. The repo might have C code in it, but that wasn't something we did in the series at all. So what's the roadmap Parag? Is that how you say it? Thanks for the question. What's the roadmap for mastering Django? Building a project for yourself first, building a project for somebody else second, reading everybody else's code. Like, read my code. I have a ton of it. Try to make sense of it. If you can, then you will be one step closer to doing that. Answering questions on Stack Overflow related to Django is another way to challenge yourself. These questions, or the questions that I get all the time, if you don't know how to answer them, then you haven't mastered it to a point where you can replace any senior level developer, right? That's what I'd say. So there's not really a clear roadmap to becoming a master of Django. I think there's a lot of different techniques you can do to get better. And of course, watching content and tutorials on how to build things, that also is really, really key into making things happen. Thanks for the question, Parag. I really appreciate it. Nikhil asks, what's your opinion on using Python for mobile development with Kiwi? Thanks for the question, Nikhil. Now, I've toyed with Kiwi here and there for the past few years, and frankly, I'm just not that impressed with it. I know there's parts of it that are awesome, but you know, it gets to a point where it's like, okay, well, what am I trying to build exactly? And that's why I think Angular and Ionic are often a better solution than Kiwi, because you use JavaScript then, or you use a lot of the web development ideas to build mobile development, or even going the route of Swift or Java, depending on what you're building for. I think those are better than Kiwi at this time. If you're not familiar with Kiwi, it's a framework to allow you to build mobile applications with Python, just Python. But I found that it's a little bit more challenging than I would have hoped. Maybe eventually there'll be something that's just a lot easier to build Python GUIs than there are out there. Now, there's some of you that would argue that it's actually really easy to build Python GUIs. And if you've never done web development, then it probably is. But if you've done web development, then it's not. Like building things, or even if you've done Swift development, they're just a lot different. I think I would say Swift development for iOS and Kiwi are probably a little bit closer related than building for the web, but I like building for the web. It's something that's not going away anytime soon. So hopefully eventually there will be a package that's written in Python that's very similar to building for the web for mobile devices, like Angular and Ionic are. Okay, just gonna grab a little coffee here while I read the next question. Hopefully that answers your question, Akhil. Thank you for it. I really do appreciate it. I love answering questions, especially the ones that are like thoughtful. Like that one I have to think about too, because Kiwi might be awesome now. I haven't played around with it in a little while. So, and I'm more than willing to be convinced otherwise, right? So I want to be. I want more tools in Python to be ridiculously awesome. And maybe it is. Okay, so how's Yafa? How's Yafa? Is that how you pronounce your name? Ask, how can I have more control over the upload to function? So when you upload files in Django, so in the file field or the image field, there's a method you can put in there called upload to, and you can actually have a custom function that can change the path as to where it's uploaded. So what you can also do is change where it's stored. So you can use custom Django file storage to change how it's stored too. So if you want to use AWS and Django storages, you can actually change how it's stored, and that's where you get that customization. The upload to method, or overriding the upload to method, it takes two arguments, instance and file name. Instance is related to the actual object that's being saved in that model. File name, of course, is the actual file name. So you can use those things to make a different path as to where you want to upload it. Be careful with this though, because the instance is a pre-saved version. So instance.id will not work, or instance.primaryKey, because it's not technically saved yet. So keep that in mind too. That's something that if you did, I think it's in TryDjango 1.9, where that's an error that I omitted or forgot about, or maybe I just maybe I didn't know then. I don't know. Okay, so next thing. Thanks for the question. Huzuya Fa. I think that's how you say it. Brandon Jacoby, what's a proper way to have multiple user types in Django without making more than one abstract base user? You should only have one base user, one user class for your Django project. That's my argument. And then you just extend things from there. So you use a one-to-one field with a different model. So let's say, for instance, you wanted to have profiles and you're asking about user types. You can create a new app called Profiles. In that Profiles app, you create a model called Profile, do a one-to-one field to your user model, and then you can say user type and then have choices of types in that profile. And then when you want to grab that user, you do request.user.profile.userType. There you go. You now have your types. And then I would just create a signal, a post-save signal for the user model to create that new profile. So whenever you create a new user, you create that profile that's related to that user at the same time. So you would put the if created clause in there too. Hopefully all that makes sense. If it doesn't, we have a lot of tutorials that explain all of those concepts in more detail somewhere else. or on jointv.com, of course, but I think even on my YouTube channel or on our YouTube channel, because this is us. This is a community. The YouTube channel exists for you guys, and the questions you ask make it better. It's plain and simple. Yes, the software that's out there also makes it better, but without your questions, I don't think it would be as good as it is. I'm pretty sure it wouldn't, actually. All right. Marco asks, thank you very much for your time. Absolutely. Happy to do these questions. Just want to ask you more, please. What's the difference between Flask and Django in general, and which one is better? Thank you again. Okay, so Marco, man, this is probably the question I get one of the most asked. Django and Flask accomplish the same thing. They help you build a web application, period. The way they do that is different, right? So Flask is more lightweight. It doesn't have as much features built into it, and for that you get speed. Speed in development, speed in releasing, and so on. It's partially one of the reasons why a lot of people use it for microservices or little services that might build up a bigger project. Now you could build everything in Flask, or everything in Django you can build with Flask, and everything in Django, and vice versa, right? So you can build the same thing with either technology because they're both based in Python. You might have to write, so like with Flask, you might have to add a lot more of your own code or third-party code to accomplish the same thing Django has out of the box, but that's where the flexibility comes in. And also the reason I give Django the edge is because I've been using it for a long time, for one, right? So I have that bias for sure, without a doubt. And two, Django has a bigger developer community, at least now. I mean, and I am making a lot of assumptions about it now, but I would say that the reason I believe that is because if you look on GitHub and you look on Stack Overflow and you look on a lot of empirical data, there's more things that are related to Django than there are to Flask. And that's why I think Django has a stronger community overall. That doesn't mean that the Flask community isn't strong in and of itself, too. But if you do searches on Amazon for books, you're going to find a lot more for Django than you will for Flask. Granted, there's a movie called Django, so maybe that makes a difference, too. But more likely than not, Django has a bigger community, and I think that's fairly accurate. I mean, it might change, because Flask itself is lightweight, so you can build things really even quicker than Django. I mean, with Django, you can build things quick too, but Flask is just so bare bones that you can build things fairly quick. So a lot of projects will have a main core project in Django, and then a lot of sub-projects or microservices in Flask that Django interacts with using an API. I asked, this might be the question that I get all the time. I probably need to make a video on it, discussing all the details of it. What do you guys think about that? Let me know. Thanks for the question, Marco. Appreciate it. Hamayan Kabir, actually, I asked, what do you think about learning and working with Roadmap with Django and Python? Oh, and your name is Humayun. Humayun, so sorry that I pronounced your name incorrectly. Thank you for giving me the pronunciation. I really appreciate it. Working Roadmap with Python and Django. I'm actually not familiar with Roadmap or what you're referring to. I'm assuming it's a technology. Let's go ahead and do a quick Google search here. You're saying Roadmap, and let's go ahead and just say Python. Roadmap, oops. Let's type correctly. Roadmap and Python. Yeah, definitely not really seeing it. So perhaps you're going to have to give me a link for that. Humayun. Thank you. Another question from Charles. Is C or C++ still relevant? Yes, I think I answered that already. Should you hone your C++ skills? I think you answered your own question, right? Like, if you're asking that, then you have some interest in it still. So yeah, why not? If you're interested in learning Python, go hone those skills. That's what I think. Prashant asked, when will Try Django 2.0 be launched? It's a good question. I don't have a release date just yet because I've been doing this. Like, I'm not working on Django right now. I'm answering questions right now. So that's part of it. But I also have another thing that I'm doing first. And if you look at our last poll, you'll see what that thing is. Kartik Giri, you're welcome. Thank you for the comment. Parag, yeah, I'm not sure what yeah is, but yeah, to you too, man. Maybe I responded to something that you said. Arsen, greetings from Russia. Hey, Arsen, greetings from the United States. Thank you for your tutorials. You're welcome. Thank you for watching them. I really appreciate it. You know, if we get, it's great. It's awesome. Arsen's asking, Flask has Flask G object. It's proxy between, which is global within request response cycle, global application. So Arsen, thanks for the details on there. For those of you who want to know some more details about Flask from Arsen, definitely check out the top chat portion. Arsen, if you have some more resources on that, please post them in the video after it goes onto the channel, so after the live stream's done, because I would imagine some other people are very interested in that itself. Eve Jenny, thank you for the question. Speaking about image optimizations, I try to check on my test site on specialized services and get bad results. User downloads 4.1 megabytes of images instead of 98 kilobytes. So it's an interesting topic. Yeah, it's definitely interesting to optimize your images, and the Python image library is really good for scaling down images. You can still keep the raw image too, but if you wanted to have something that's downloadable or easily downloadable for your users, you can use PIL, or the Python image library, to accomplish that. It's really, really cool. Akeem, I skipped your question. I'm sorry, man. Can you ask it again? Yeah, sorry for skipping it. Didn't mean to do that. I'm just, scrolling through here looking. What about Rust, which is a new low-level language? Rust, I haven't used it much, so I've heard the speed is really good. And I would imagine asking someone who deals with Rust more often would be better. So maybe a Stack Overflow post or somebody who works in Rust, which I do not. Wow, I am so far behind. I'm sorry, guys. My biggest challenge with Django Forms is the admin offers the plus pop-up button for foreign key fields. How do you implement this in templates is hard with JS multiple page forms. Yeah, so what you're asking is, like, how do you automatically generate new forms to add to any given instance or model where the Django admin. This must be what you were talking about with customizing the Django admin. Perhaps that was you, maybe it wasn't. Jeffrey, basically what you want to do here is look at Django form sets and use Django form sets to work with foreign keys and those form sets. And then you're going to want to use, I believe there's an empty field. I haven't done this in a while, but I believe there's an empty field that you can have that JavaScript can copy whatever that empty form set is. And so using jQuery or whatever, you can copy that empty form set, and then you can implement the data you need from there, much like the Django admin does. Absolutely a way to do it. So just look up form sets, like making a form set like the Django admin. There's probably some sort of Stack Overflow post related to that. And I think on my site, I do something like that somewhere with form sets. So if you do a search on joincfe.com for form sets, I believe there's something related to that specifically. It might be old, but I mean, if it's in the archive, it's in the archive, but the concept is still relevant today based off of your question too. Okay, Arsen asks, why can't we use Python's global declaration? Because we will use this variable in all threads and or unicorn processes simultaneously, right? Sorry, I'm not following what you're asking, Arsen, and I'm going to be wrapping up soon. So maybe ask that question after the video or a little bit longer, because I'm not exactly sure what you're trying to ask. YSRR, thanks for the info on our APIs. Absolutely. Is it possible to create a tutorial on a REST API in detail? Yes, I have a huge one. It's called REST API, and it's on joincfe.com/courses, and it builds off of a e-commerce project. So if you want really in-depth stuff, that is the one. Like I go through a lot there to build a REST API. using the Django REST framework. And you could also use the quicker one, which is on YouTube, that's related to that same course. There's one that's like rapid fire. I think it's like an hour long. You can use that one to learn a lot of those general concepts, and then use our code on joincfe.com/GitHub if you're not ready to make the investment on the website, which is fine. You can absolutely, I mean, that's why I put the GitHub stuff out there, so you guys can still learn if you aren't ready to invest in, in yourself and going on the website, right? Or you can't afford it or something like that. I can completely understand. So anyways, let's go next. Dig VJ. What about Django and MongoDB? The last I saw, MongoDB's third-party package doesn't integrate with Django securely, so I wouldn't recommend using it at this time. Maybe that's changed, but as far as I know, it hasn't. Fonny asks, how do you see Django in the future? So I'm assuming you're saying, like, where is Django going? I think what Django's going to is asynchronous code, so it works faster and multi-threaded. Processes work a little bit better. So that would be my guess, is it's going to be faster. It's hard to say, actually, because it's also possible that a new technology will come out in relation to artificial intelligence and deep learning that will make web development a lot different and look a lot different, to where something like Django and Flask won't be around. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. I think that it will, because I have no reason to doubt it, because you've got a lot of people working on it and doing really great things. The core developers, the community at large. So as far as where it's going, I think it's really hard to predict, because the future itself is uncertain. So sorry, that doesn't probably answer your question, but it's tough to predict where something might go. But I think this year and the next few years, they're probably going to do a lot more asynchronous code, so it just runs differently, which means that there's going to be a lot of new challenges for us as new web developers to get our minds around how to work with asynchronous code, because it's different. It's different than step-by-step and one-by-one. Cool. Thanks for the question, Fadi. I appreciate it. Okay, so I'm going to take probably like a couple more questions, and then I'm going to wrap it up. So let's see. Chris Camario from Tanzania. Hey, what's up, man? I've heard great things about Tanzania. I've got a friend who just absolutely loves it there. I have not made it there myself, but someday I think that I will. I'll bring my family and check it out. I love your channel. Thanks so much. I love you for saying that. I work hard to do this stuff because it's super interesting, don't you think? Between Python and Go language, what is the best for microservice? So the Go programming language, I don't work with like at all, right? I've done a couple things in it and dabble a little bit. So obviously I'm going to say Python, but Go has had a lot of popularity and it's grown a lot in usage. So personally, I would say Python, because there's probably a lot more resources for Python for all the reasons I just got into about Django and Flask. So Go itself is meant to be a clean, fast running language. So it might be worth, if you know enough about Python, it might be worth testing things out in Go. The good question is, that I don't know the answer to, is there a Go web framework that's made more geared towards microservices, like Flask can be used towards microservices? It's smaller, it's more lightweight. Or is there even a Go web framework? I don't know that answer. That would be something I would look up if I was you. Crescent from Kenya. Hey, what's up? Never been to Kenya either. Definitely want to go there at some point. And I believe a friend of a friend lives there and has lived there for years, that was from California, and loves it. So I'm going to have to check it out at some point. Thanks for the question. I've been doing Django for a while now and started on basics on some JavaScript framework. What is best to integrate between Angular and React? So to integrate Django with Angular and React, yeah, go back to what I said probably like an hour ago. I mean, I talk about this a lot. So to integrate it, you just build an API with Django, and then you have one view that renders an HTML document that loads your Angular or React, if that's what you're asking. If you're asking how to integrate Angular and React on one project. I don't know if I would do that, because they're both front-end frameworks that do this, that can do the same thing. So I wouldn't really put Angular and React on the same project on the same page. I think there's going to be a lot of conflicts there in working. There might be a way to do it. I'm sure there's somebody out there that has. I just wouldn't recommend it. Chris asked again, the Python and Go service. Thanks for the questions, Chris. You've asked a few times. I think I answered it now. Okay, so I'm going to take two more questions, two more unique questions. Mamadul, what is the proper way to implement multiple user type? We just answered that question a little bit ago, so go back. Okay, do you have experience with behavior-driven development? So behavior-driven development, I'm assuming that might be a term that is like changing how you do your development flow in general. What I would say is, you know, watching your users' behavior, whether it's using Google Analytics or some other analytic tool, is something that you should do from the get-go. You should always see what users are doing, and by tracking what they do is a good way to do that, to change the way you drive and build your projects based on the behavior of your users. So I think that's more of a methodology than anything. There might be, like I said, there might be a third-party thing out there that does it for you, but I would say you could build an analytics tools yourself using Django if that's what you're doing. But using something like Google Analytics or some sort of heat map monitor, you can start to tweak things based on what your users are doing. But of course, that means you have users and you're making changes based off of that. Thank you for the question. Next, Andreas asks, do you think the PyPy interpreter is a real alternative, for example, using it with Django? A real alternative to what? Are you referring to PyEnv or virtual environments? I'm not sure about that, the answer to that question, so I'm going to have to, I'm going to have to skip that one, and maybe you can rephrase it for next time. Thanks for the question, though. Appreciate it. Thanks for all of the questions, guys. This is a lot of fun. Okay, so last question, again from Jeff. Justin, I've observed that a lot of questions since the 31st stream are about Django and suitable front-end technologies, especially how to integrate. Perhaps you should bridge that, Justin. Yeah, I think that I might have to do that, Jeffrey. Is it Jeffrey or Joffrey? Like Joffrey from Game of Thrones. I think it's Jeffrey. I think that's how you pronounce it. Tell me if that's how you pronounce it. Okay, last question. This is definitely the last question, and it's from Abdul Salim. How do you see web technology in the future? Any plans on creating your own framework? Okay, so web technology in the future, this is what I believe. I believe that we're going to have some sort of AI, probably generated through deep learning, much like you've seen in many other AI things like voice, right? Or the video game playing computer AI systems are done through deep learning. I think we're going to have some sort of deep learning framework that builds the code for us in a way that we can still read it as humans, but in a way that's going to be a lot faster and more effective than ever before, right? And that is the only time I would probably ever consider building my own web framework, is by using an AI that can actually code for me, but still directed by me, but at the same time doing things that I've never even thought about. That is how I think the future of web development is going to go, as well as just general software usage. Now, how long is it going to take us to get there? I have no idea. It's not something that I'm currently actively pursuing. And honestly, I don't know of many people that are, because the people who do software or who code or computer programmers, a lot of them like doing it. So I'm not positive if this automation thing will happen where we're telling a computer, hey, I need this, and this for my web application. Go make it happen. And then it comes back and tells us, oh, if you're doing those things, I recommend that you do these implementations too. And actually, I already did them for you. You know, if you've watched Iron Man and Marvel, kind of like if Jarvis was giving suggestions to how you actually build your web application. I think that's coming. I think the suggestion part will be coming soon too, in the next few years, because it just makes sense that it would, right? Like how do you empower one person to build even better projects? And I think a big part of that will be driven from artificial intelligence. It's a really, really interesting time to be a developer in general. So thanks so much for the questions, you guys. If you want to see this live stream, or if you want to see our live streams, make sure that you subscribe and hit that bell, because that's the only way you'll hear about the notifications when they come out. And if you have more questions, even if I didn't get to them, so I definitely have like I probably have like another hour's worth of questions on here, which is awesome. I'm stoked to get that many more questions. But unfortunately, once this goes into just the YouTube channel, when the live stream stops, I kind of lose all of those questions, so I miss them. I know there's a way to do it, but it'd be better if you left them in the comments after it posts onto my YouTube channel, which probably takes about an hour. So in an hour from now, if I didn't get to your question, ask the question there, because at the beginning of my next live stream, you'll be able to get some answers from that question in general. Thanks so much for watching, guys. I really appreciate it. I appreciate all of the questions, the interest, your attention. This is really fun to do. There's a lot. I mean, there's just so much stuff that we can learn from, and I'm glad that we can do this together. Thanks again. I will see you guys next time.